I just want to say, like, if there are any psychiatrists listening right now, I know that there's a percentage of psychiatrists who are great, who don't overdiagnose and overprescribe. I think this is a relatively small percentage, but I just want to acknowledge that I would never question the intelligence of psychiatrists or anything like that. It's the principles of the practice that we're really criticizing. And the fact that, you give a nice analogy that if you want meat, don't go to a bakery. And you use that analogy to describe if you want help with mental health, don't go to someone, don't go to a psychiatrist, was your point. And the reason for that is that psychiatrists are not trained in psychology. They're not necessarily trained in specifically understanding mental and emotional dynamics. They're medical doctors. So they go to medical school and they become experts in anatomy and physiology and disease epidemiology. And you can, of course, correct me or add to this because you actually did that. But the point is that psychiatrists are not experts in psychology. And yet people who are suffering psychologically, emotionally, seek a psychiatrist for help, and they may be under the wrong impression about what the expertise of a psychiatrist really is. And then when you consider that, it starts to make more sense that so many people will meet with a psychiatrist and within minutes, less than 10 minutes usually, they have a diagnosis and a prescription for a drug.
Yes. Let me see how I can best tackle what you just said. First of all, I also want to acknowledge the good psychiatrists. I know many of them, but they are very, very small in number. They are drops in the ocean, unfortunately. So that's why you should not go to a psychiatrist if you get a mental health problem. It's far too dangerous. You should go to a psychologist or someone else who has an education in psychotherapy. But people are realizing more and more that psychiatry has been a huge failure. The so-called biological psychiatry that tells you that you have a chemical imbalance in your brain. That's why you became ill. That's the worst of all lies in psychiatry. It's totally wrong. And then people get hooked on pills and think, well, I have a chemical imbalance, so I need this drug for the rest of my life, of course. So it's making things worse to tell people lies like this. Mm. And people are now realizing, the good psychiatrists, that this is just so horribly wrong. So I'm a member of, for example, the Critical Psychiatry Network, which is based in the UK and mainly has UK psychiatrists as members, but I have also been allowed to be there. And I'm not the only critical voice. There are many good critical voices there. And Joanna Moncrief is one of them, and I know her. I have met with her. She's very good. Sami Timimi, a child psychiatrist, is another one. There is a limit as to how long you can sustain a totally sick system, which is what psychiatry is today. And I see a good development in many places and many countries. For example, more and more soteria-like homes in more and more countries after the Lapland model in northern Finland, where people are taken care of immediately when they develop a psychosis. And you don't jump on them with these horrible drugs. You actually talk to them and don't use these neuroleptics as much as in the rest of the world. And you have far better long-term outcomes. Mm-hmm. These people come back to work and school at a hugely greater rate than those who get antipsychotics. And people realize this more and more, but it's far too slow. Far too many people are killed in the process or develop permanent brain damage.
Mm.
So the process, the change needs to be much quicker, and we need to develop a radically different psychiatry. The way psychiatry is constructed today, that you go and see a psychiatrist and then you are interviewed, and then the psychiatrist has some checklist for various diagnoses. And these checklists are very, very unscientific and highly unreliable. And I can give you just one example. When I lecture for ordinary people, I expose them to the checklist for adult ADHD. And at every single lecture, between 1/3 and 1/2 test positive. I've even tried in my own close family. My wife and I, my youngest daughter and her boyfriend, we all could get the adult ADHD diagnosis. But we are normal. And my youngest daughter's boyfriend, he is very laid back, very calm. You would never expect him to be able to qualify for that diagnosis, but he did.
Mm.
And then I explained to people, some of the most important people I have ever met in this world, they will qualify for the ADHD diagnosis because these people are energetic, dynamic people who don't want to waste their time and therefore leave a lecture if it's too dull, or move around on their chair like children do when they get the ADHD diagnosis because they are bored.
Mm.
It's horrible. And then they get these drugs that are speed on prescription. They work like amphetamine, and sometimes they are amphetamine.
Mm. Yes. And, I feel like of all the criticisms that can be made, perhaps the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest one, is psychiatric drugs in children. To
Oh,
me,
yes.
this is just the most appalling and easily deconstructible practice. It's really unbelievable to me that this is becoming so commonplace. And you make a good point that we wouldn't, if someone said to a circle of friends, yeah, my kid's like really anxious, so I just put a little whiskey in their orange juice every morning, everyone would look at them like, are you crazy? Or if I
Yeah.
said, yeah, sometimes when my kid's a little active, I just let them, hit my joint of cannabis, they would be like, what? Put this parent in jail. Where's Child Protective Services? But then
Yeah.
we just accept it as normal to, and it's because an authority figure is saying to do so. So I wouldn't necessarily fault the parents, but we accept it as normal to give kids Adderall and amphetamines and all the psychiatric drugs. Many people don't even question it.